Hey, how's it going? Today is going to be part 3, so I got 3 parts. Now for part 3, I'm going to get into the modifications tab right here, and I'm just going to cover this whole page for the modifications tab. This is kind of like looks a little bit trickier than it really is in some ways. It's not that complicated, and we should be able to get through this fairly quickly. And I'm also going to go through all of these right here, all of these sources and what they do specifically in this demonstration. One thing just to be very clear, it's important that you know that how the modulation works in Diva, because you have a lot of preset sources of modulation, but you have to be aware that you can change the sources of modulation. For example, right, we got here, and let's just play a couple notes. You can see this is being modulated by envelope 2. But if I wanted to, I could modulate this by LFO 2 by switching it down right here. Right? Or envelope 1. Okay. So this is how you can switch things out. And then if you just go back to the last one, or you just go to default, it's going to default it back to whatever it was before originally. When you understand how those things get switched out, now you can understand how you're going to use some of these down here. For example, rectify, invert, quantize, lag, multiply, and add to change out the modulations to reflect these instead. So when you do that, that enables you to make full use of this page. But first, we're going to go right here to kind of the basics, because this also relates to what I brought up here. How there are these different modulations that you have access to up in the main page. However, there are some that you don't have access to right here that are not on the main page, and that differ when you switch out different oscillators and filters and envelopes. And that's where this comes in, because it gives you a couple of extra functions. So this page up here is pretty basic and straightforward. This essentially is like a global modulation page for some additional functions that are missing up here that you might not get when you switch out different oscillators, filters, etc. For example, FM cross mod depth. This would be like this FM 1 to 2 and 3 depth. When you go to Dual VCO cross mod depth, DCO, nothing really. Dual Eco, nothing really there. Digital cross mod depth right there. That's what this knob is for. So the reason this is there is because this actually allows you to control this knob right here with another parameter. So for example, let's go to oscillator 2. Okay, like this. And we're going to, let's play a couple notes. And we're going to bring up this FM. So we're going to frequency modulate this oscillator 2 with oscillator 1. So let's bring this up. And if we change the frequency, that changes the character of the frequency modulation. And one other thing you'll see also how this page down here is useful, for example, is you can see how when you're doing on the Moog, this FM 1 to 2 and 3, you don't have a pitch like a detune for oscillator 1. You only have octaves, so you're stuck at the root note. So like, because you don't have these kind of options up here, you think, well, I'm just stuck at the root note. But by using these functions down here, you can get out of some of these restrictions. So we went to the FM right here, and I showed you how when you bring it up, you get a different tone. Now, what if I wanted to have something like this going on? Right? What if like that was the start of a patch or something? Right now, I don't have any way to do that other than manually or by editing like a MIDI knob and going outside the synth. But I do have a way to do it using right here. You see it says FM and cross mod depth. This is your FM and cross mod depth. And this is a drop down menu that's just like one of these modulators right here. So you drop it down and let's say I want that effect. Then I can do that with an envelope. I can do it with an LFO. So let's go to LFO 2. Bring the rate down to how I want it. And then let's turn up the strength to a positive level. Say I want it a little quicker. See, so that's, and you see this little red M? That means it's being modulated by one of these pages. You see M? All right. Like if I turn this up a little stronger, I can get that effect. Or if I change this to like a saw down. So that's what that's for. And if you go to negative, you get it inverted. And 0 is right here in the middle. And you can do that with anything. Like I could change this to envelope 2. That's how that works. All right. And when you click that out and you go to none, you'll see all that has disappeared, the M. So now we're back at using it like regular. And just to show you, for example, on the Dual VCO, it's the exact same thing. This cross mod depth. Let's go back to, let's say like LFO 2. And let's put it on oscillator 2. Hear how that sounds? There's our saw. All right. So you can see how that kind of works right there. And that would be the same with the digital and whatever has that cross mod available. Now that you understand how these fundamentals work and how this actually modifies different things, we can go through these a little bit quicker. So resonance mod, that is, you see how this allows you to, by default, every filter lets you obviously modulate the cutoff frequency by like an envelope. Envelope 2, in this case, to cutoff, right? What if instead of that, I wanted to do something like this, and I wanted to put envelope 2 to the resonance, this emphasis or resonance or whatever it's labeled in the different filters. I can just go here, resonance mod, envelope 2. This controls the resonance. Right, so like now you can kind of combine these. So that's how that works. And again, you can go negative too. If you bring this up and you bring this down, you can hear how it starts at high resonance and then goes down because it's a negative attack. So that lets you basically just control the resonance. Feedback mod right here. This is for your feedback knob. Same exact concept. You put your something through a filter. Bring up your feedback, whatever that sounds like. Basically, you can hear how there's a difference there. Right? And we can emulate that same effect by using the feedback mod. And let's say I put in LFO 2 again, and I turn that up. You can see that's got the M. So basically, these just control, they're just extra modulation drop-down menus for various parameters here. In this case, FM, cross mod depth, resonance, feedback, and these apply to whatever oscillators or filters have those parameters. If they don't have those parameters, these will do nothing. For example, Dual VCO Eco does not have a cross mod, so when you put something in the cross mod, it's not going to have any effect. This is noise and Dual VCO mix. So like you put something in here, and this acts a little differently depending on what oscillator you have, but this will bring in the noise at that LFO. Or like if you have a this actually doesn't just control the noise. It depends. It changes how it works based on which oscillator you select. See, because it says noise and dual VCO mix. So in this case, we're controlling the dual VCO mix because it doesn't have a dedicated noise. You know, DCO. See how this doesn't have a VCO mix, but it does have a noise that goes up here. So you can see where it affects it. In this case, it's controlling volume of oscillator 1. So every oscillator has got a different effect. And you can see by that M what exactly it's changing. So let's clear that out again. Last one here is your filter FM mod. This is just that filter FM knob right here. It just kind of puts something. Like imagine that. So that's the way you can kind of hear it clearly. And go here, put an LFO. And again, that's modulating this knob right here. And depending on what kind of filter you have, it's going to show you where exactly it's modulating. Now we're actually done with all of these up here. And let's just go straight down to right here. We'll go to Rectify, Quantize, Invert, Lag, Multiply, and Add. Now, one of the things I wanted to cover before I go into this screen is what exactly each one of these modulation sources does. And I'm going to go straight from the top down to the bottom. So we're going to go to Control A and Control B. Let's say this is modulating something. Like let's say our filter, for example, Control A and Control B. Now normally these won't do anything unless you have a special MIDI controller with certain functions that you want to assign to that. Right now it's not going to do anything because I don't have any kind of MIDI controller with those functions. And you can see what those functions are right here. You go to settings and it says right here, Control A default. This is CC2. This is breath. And Control B default is expression. So those are MIDI control signals. If you have an advanced MIDI controller with different control signals, then you should know what those are. And if you have like a breath controller, expression, something like that, that's what those slots are. So then if you had like breaths A, then when I put that right here, then that breath would move the cutoff. Now that's Control A and B. Envelope 1, that's obvious. Envelope 1. Envelope 2, we know what that is. Envelope 2. Gate. Gate is just like the same thing I went over here in the main 1 video. Like the VCA, by default, it's controlled by envelope 1, or you can control it by the gate. And the gate gives you basically like something like this, like an organ kind of looking envelope. And it's actually like the release is like a little bit longer than your key release. So it gives you an option to kind of play around with this. But I'm not going to be talking about this. A gate is just like when you press the key and when you let it off, and it just is kind of envelope shape like this. So that's identical to that function. So basically it's just like when you press the key, this is going to go up and you won't even really hear the difference or any movement because it's just full on or full off. speed. So it's just like this. That's why you're not hearing any movement. And then key follow is just like basic, the same thing here as keyboard tracking. So as it goes up, it opens the filter. Keyboard tracking, that's all that is. Keyboard follow 2 is keyboard tracking that correlates with this glide 2 parameter. So like it depends on the bottom oscillators and so forth. To be honest with you, I just don't really use this. If you want to play with your glide 2 and you want to offset the glide parameters for the 2 oscillators and then try out keyboard tracking 2 and see how that affects whatever you're putting it on, that's basically what's that there for. If you're not playing with glide 2, there's no reason to ever use key follow 2. You just use key follow 1, and that gives you regular keyboard tracking to any parameter that you have an option to add it to, and that includes all of these right here. You could put keyboard tracking for your cross mod depth, for your feedback, filter FM, and modulate it with that. We know LFO1 is just this LFO1 right here. In this case, this is right now modulated by the mod wheel. So if I bring the mod wheel up, we got that. LFO2. We got that. We know what that is. Mod wheel as just the modulation wheel. Me bringing it up and down. Pitch wheel is just, you can assign like a pitch wheel to open your filter, for example, and your pitch at the same time, which is something done in like Juno synths and other synthesizers, SH. As an option, you can set that up for yourself like this. All right. And keep in mind, any of these can go positive or negative. Pressure is like aftertouch. Velocity, we know what velocity does. Just how hard you hit the keys. That adds velocity sensitivity to whatever parameter, which can get interesting because you can add it to here and have different velocity affect your FM depth or something like that. These are all the top ones right here. Now, when you go to the bottom ones, when you go to add, now we're going to get into this page. When you go to add, this puts whatever you have set up in your add into modulating that. If you have nothing, it'll do nothing. Okay, if you have something, you add 2 things together, you put it there in add, you're now changing and modulating that with the add. And when we get into using these, you'll see I'm going to use that. Alternate. Alternate just means every time you press a key, it goes full on or full off, and it changes. Like, it gives me one maximum value, like 100%, and negative 100% every other keystroke. So if you wanted to use that for some reason, that's what alternate does. Invert. This just brings whatever you put into invert right here for modulation. Lag brings whatever you put into lag right here for modulation. Multiply, whatever you put into multiply right here for modulation. Quantize, whatever you put into quantize right here for modulation. And then random just gives you a random value every time that you press a note. All right, that can be useful for creating different effects, ambiances, things like that. Rectify is whatever you put in rectify affects your modulation. Stack index, this one is a little bit funky. It doesn't really interact in the normal way that you might think it would. It actually like modulates this parameter sort of like between the stacks, and I go into the stacks in video 1 and video 2. All right. But this modulates like this between the stacks. It's a little bit hard to explain what exactly it does, but if you hear it, you will know. For example, right now in my main, I'm going to put stack like 2, and I got a stack here. This will be a 0, and let's say this will be turned up to a 5th on stack 2. Again, if you don't understand what I'm doing, check out video 1 and 2 on the stacks. And then when I move this, it's going to like modulate the filter between the stacks. Like you have a 5th and you have a single. And that can just, you know, if you're playing like this, you can have interesting effects like that. And actually, there would be a way to do that, believe it or not, like this. That kind of effect using those modifications page right here. And I'll show you how to do something like that right after we cover this. The voice map, we went over this in video 2. This is related to your trimmers, and if you want to change a specific voice, you bring this up, you bring in voice map, and this will change for only one voice. If you want to get more in depth on that, check out the video in the trimmers. So now we covered all those modulation sources and what they are. Now we're going to go into this bottom page right here. Some of the easiest ones to start with is just multiply and add. And these are like math functions, but really basic math. Like, you know, what's 2 plus 3 versus 2 times 3. That's all that is. So like, obviously when you move a knob, it has a value and you can see it up here. The maximum, let's say, is 150 and the minimum is 30, right? So imagine if you like added these two together, like at 50. So 50 plus 50, you get, you know, 100. But if you went to multiply like 50 times 50, you would probably just get to the maximum and stop there until you bring it down enough where it starts making a difference below the maximum, which in this case it wouldn't. But, you know, it's just whatever kind of value that you have, that's the multiplication. So remember we did this kind of trick here with a stack index, right? And this moves between the different tunings of the stack. So, for example, one of the things I could do is like, you know, anything times 0 is 0. Right? You just got to know a little bit of basic math for this. Very basic. Anything times 0 is 0. So if you multiply anything times like nothing, you're going to get nothing. So same if you multiply anything times like a 0 value, you're going to get nothing. But if you multiply it times a greater value, you're going to like exponentially increase the value of the effect. So for example, let's take the stack and multiply the stack index, and we're going to times it by envelope 2. And we're going to take this envelope 2 and bring everything to 0. Instead of putting stack index here, we're going to put multiply, because now this is referencing what's in multiply, which includes our stack index. You kind of got to think about this a little bit, but once you get a grasp of it, you'll see it's pretty straightforward. So you put multiply there, and since it's times envelope 2 and envelope 2 is 0, you're not going to hear anything. But let's say envelope 2 is... That's because we have a sustained value now. And what if we wanted to automate this? Let's bring in an attack. Do you see how that works? Like, we can multiply this times LFO2. That's how that multiply works. You can multiply LFO1 times LFO2. Let's take off this mod wheel modulation and give this a value. So you can see how that multiply works. You just multiply any value times any value, and you can basically get some interesting effects. So you can play around and experiment with how you want to do the multiply functions, and you know, different things to multiply. You get a lot of different ideas. I go into some of the tricks in my LFO video, envelope video, about some ways that I use the multiply function. Now we get into the add function. Add function is pretty straightforward. It's like if you want to double the strength of something, or just double its effect, or you want to basically add two parameters together as one and have them both controlling something. Like let's say I have my envelope 2. And I want to also control with my LFO 2. I can add together envelope 2 with LFO 2. And then I put add in here. This references whatever I put there. You can hear how it actually it adds it together. It just gives you like LFO plus that envelope of increasing. Right? And then like if I wanted to maybe use that, but then I wanted to you know, control that LFO with something, I could just put my mod wheel in here. Where's my mod wheel? Right there. And make its depth effect at 100%. So now when I have no mod wheel, I just get the envelope. And then as I bring in the mod wheel, I start bringing in the LFO. See, that's just me bringing in the mod wheel. And that's, you kind of got to understand how this depth mod affects. This basically controls the modulation depth of whatever is here. So at 100%, the mod wheel controls the effect of the LFO. That's why I can do that. You can see how they kind of start relating mathematically, and then just basic like plus minus times, you know, and then you just reference whatever you have right there, and that's how it works together. So that's that. You know, I won't go through every single like variation, because this is like you have to just come up with things as you go and be creative and think, maybe I multiply like my LFO times something that I put like in the rectify, and I times that by the LFO, and then I put that parameter up here, and like you can come up with something original. This is kind of the point. It gives you some extra functions for how to use a synthesizer. All right, so let's go to Rectify. What does Rectify do? Rectify just makes it like in such a way that whatever you have is essentially cut only from the bottom up. So I'm gonna open like a paint program, and I'm gonna make some very, very crude drawings with a paint tool that'll show you a bit about what these functions do. So for example, if we're using Rectify, this is like, keep in mind I'm drawing with the mouse, so this is not gonna look good, but it'll give you the idea. If you have an LFO like this, yeah, it looks pretty bad, but there you go. And there's your zero crossing point. Let me just make that zero crossing point like a different color like this. All right, and we'll go back to the LFO. This is Picasso right here. And you can see how it goes above and it goes down and it goes above and it goes down. So if we're gonna apply Rectify, we get our zero crossing point, and anywhere that this LFO goes down is gonna go back up like a mirror. It's just a mirror like this, boom, like that, because you had like that was there, it got mirrored right above. So you're gonna get this kind of shape now. So this only works for values that inherently go negative. Like a regular envelope is always positive, like a ADSR, for example, is always positive, right? So you put a Rectify on ADSR, it's not going to do anything because you don't have anything to mirror. So Rectify is like a mirror. Okay, so like, for example, let's go to LFO 2 again, and we're going to rectify our LFO 2. So like, let's just check how the LFO 2 normally sounds. Turn off that mod wheel control and turn that depth mod back down so it's not affecting anything with the modulation. Now we get the LFO 2 sound. It's a little maybe easier if we hear it with like a triangle wave. Now let's put in Rectify instead. So this is referencing Rectify, which has LFO 2 in it. It like doubles because you get that mirror effect. So instead of doing this, it's like da 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 da. It's like twice as fast, and the shape is a little different. You hear that? Rectify. So again, it's like, there's not like a standard way to use this, or like, just use this on the LFO. It's like, if you start thinking, understanding about how this works, and you start really thinking about it, and you can come up with ways to, you know, create something that's interesting. For example, like one of the things that I use is, you remember how I told you before, there's a way to change the pitch of this particular FM situation here, because you don't have a fine tune knob. So let me get rid of this real quick, and I'll show you how that's done. Remember that alternate? The alternate is when we pressed like one key. So let's go to here and let's go to alternate. And this is assuming you understand how this, you know, this Moog oscillator works. But you go to alternate, you press one key, it's maximum to the right, one key is maximum to the left, right? So we're gonna put like something like this to affect oscillator 1 with an alternate. So let's just turn up oscillator 1 real quick. And let's turn the tune mod. You see that? So the more you turn it up, it does the maximum, minimum alternation. But remember, like, we have this rectify. So what rectify would do in this case is, like, let me delete these scribbles right here and make some new scribbles with this rectify function, and I'll show you how that works. So let's, you know, put a color kind of red and then some kind of blue. All right, so like alternate, we have our zero crossing point. Let's get the paintbrush out, zero crossing point. And then we have alternate, maximum, minimum, maximum, each keystroke, right? Like this. So with rectify, bang, put that there, maximum, next key, maximum, next key, maximum. What does that give us? It gives us a straight line, a maximum value. All right. So you, instead of doing this alternate, you rectify your alternate, giving you that maximum value, and you put in here rectify. Now check this out, what happens. As I increase my tune mod, every key is only going to be one maximum value. What do we have here? We got a fine tune knob for, we now got a detune knob for our oscillator 1. Why do we use that? Let's bring in FM, oscillator 2. And let's change our fine tuning now. Right? So you can see, and that can also do when you do FM oscillator 1, for example, if you wanted to do with that, you're not stuck to that basic tuning now. You can, you know, if you're going to use a high resonance, you can probably hear it easier. There we got our fine tune for oscillator 1. All right. Now, what if I wanted to do something like this? Imagine that, right? So like one way I could do that is like, this is where we go back to being creative. You multiply your rectify times LFO2, for example, and then we're going to put our LFO2 on like a mod wheel depth control. So like now we have to put in multiply here to reference that point. Now, like, you see how that's kind of not strong enough? What if I wanted to double that strength? I put in multiply in here, plus multiply, and then I go to add, and I reference what I put in add, which is double strength multiply. That's how that works. You see how you can start thinking of creative ways to add all these parts together. Let me just clear all this out. And you saw how I kind of just on the nose just got kind of started thinking, oh, how do I make this like this and this like that? And you can kind of see how you start using these functions. That's that. We're going to go through these last three pretty quickly because I really went in depth now, I think, with the multiply, the add, and how to use everything. Quantize, what Quantize basically does is like, there's some older synthesizers that have like digital stepping in their controls. Like when you're moving a knob or you're using an envelope or something, there's like a digital stepping, so it's not smooth. And this is just like an artifact. But this can be used to creative purpose if you wanted to use it like that. So let's go here. We're going to clear this out again. So I'll just show you real quick how like a digital stepping would look. Let's say like we got something like this, and then we wanted to move, let's say it's either an envelope or an LFO or a manual control. And we normally have a shape, but digital stepping would give you like little pixels, little stepping effect, right? That, you know, if you know about stepping and analog synthesizers and so forth, this was giving you a way to emulate that to either a small or extreme amount. So like, for example, let's go to this filter sweep. Envelope 2. Let's go to Quantize. I'm going to go to envelope 2, and we're going to reference our Quantize. So right now we got like a pretty extreme stepping, something like just like that, basically. Right, but if we bring this up, it's pretty cool, right? Almost sounds like it's got a LFO on it, but it's like you get these kind of effects. Right, so like we could do that to LFO or quantize a manual function. Like we can quantize our mod wheel movement, and you know, let's put in mod wheel, and we can get that same stepping effect with the mod wheel now. That's me moving the mod wheel. So that's what Quantize does. And it's basically just like that. And again, you can start thinking of how you want to modulate things using this multiply, add, and everything like that. And don't forget, you can also rectify. You can rectify an LFO, and then like let's just do that real quick. We'll rectify, for example, LFO 1, and then we're going to quantize our rectify, which means like, okay, we rectified LFO 1, so if we put in rectify here now, we get a rectified LFO 1 sound. And then if we put in quantize, instead we're getting a quantized version of whatever is in rectify, which is LFO 1. You can hear if you put that through some kind of, you start detuning it, put it through some reverb, you know, for example, like this, put some chorus on there, bang, put some reverb. Right, this is like, that's how you start using things to get creative sound effects and ambiances and things like that. Invert is pretty straightforward. It's similar to Rectify, all right, but instead of rectification, instead of getting a total mirror, it just flips it upside down. If you had an LFO like this, it would basically just flip it like that. Okay, so like, again, you can do things like rectify something, then multiply that rectification by something else, and then like invert that multiplication, and then put invert right here, and you get like the final product of that whole chain controlling your parameter. All right, so that's kind of where you can start thinking about how to use something like invert, because like right off the bat you just think, well, you know, invert LFO2, what's the point kind of that, or something, you know, like I mean, it just for example, LFO2, let me get rid of this mod wheel depth thing, and right now let's put a something like a sawtooth down. All right, starting with the gate when I press the note. If I wanted to invert that, I go to invert. Okay, so that's basically all that does. The last one here is lag. What lag does is like it softens whatever you have. So like it can be used on envelopes, it can be used on LFOs and other shapes that have hard edges. For example, we're going to go back here, create a line. This is our zero crossing point. And let's say like we have, you know, like a sawtooth, boom, like this, and a square. You know, these are our two LFOs. If we started putting some lag to it, we would end up with something a little bit more like this. Like starting to kind of get a sign. It like rounds out the corners, or like a square. We start getting something like this. Okay, so let's try it out real quick. We'll go back to our just standard LFO2 sawtooth thing, and we're going to put it through a lag processor. We're going to put in our lag here. Let's just kind of open this a little bit. You hear that? How it softens it up? Regular. And it kind of like cuts it down a little bit too. As it like softens it, it's almost like a clipping. So it actually softens the effect a little bit. You see that? Like this? Like, so it makes it less, so you might have to bring up the control more to replicate the same amount that you had before. Kind of like, it's like almost like a soft clipper for functions. So that's all that lag does. So now you understand everything on the modifications page and all the modulation parameters and everything. So I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial. Again, please check out the link at the bottom of this video for preset packs for Diva, Obsession, Behringer K2, others. And please like and subscribe if you like the video and the content. Really appreciate it. I'm going to be making more stuff like this soon. And leave any of your feedback in the comments. Have a wonderful day.